Hello, friends and viewers from all around the world, but specifically our Sacramento pals. It's been a long time. Shouldn't have left you without some digital video and content to step to. I think maybe the last time some of these people saw us, Sean, was in Miami for the Super Bowl. What
Might
do
have
you
been.
think?
No, I mean it might have been, but it also seems like we did one of these right before the whole thing got shut down, if you remember, from Golden One Center, and being in there and looking around at the time, not knowing that about 15 minutes after the fact that it would all be come crashing down and the NBA season would be suspended and the whole world would look a hell of a lot different than it did at that moment. Yeah, a lot has changed.
Yeah, but what hasn't changed is that I'm Lena Washington. This is Sean Cunningham. As you can see from our Zoom handles,
Welcome to our homes.
Welcome to our homes. We got dogs and people aplenty just roaming around. But we are both working remotely. We haven't seen the inside of our newsroom at ABC 10 since March 16th, I would say, at the very latest. I know we covered the recommendations for travel at Sacramento International Airport that Monday, following the NBA's postponement and basically the halting of all of the sports world back in March. But here we are. Sports are resuming slowly. This time next week, or at least by next week, we'll have two major American sports leagues in full effect in terms of the NBA beginning scrimmages and Major League Baseball starting back up. So we've been able to gather some content and talk to some coaches, players in various Zoom meetings, but most recently, the Kings. So they are in Orlando. They are 1 week out from their first of three scrimmages, and they have just been going through it with with positive tests among four players. It was confirmed that the fourth positive test that came from the organization, the member of the traveling party, we can suspect was Harrison Barnes. And now we hear that De'Aaron Fox is out for some time at least with a sprained ankle. And I just can't think of any other NBA team that's had to really deal with this. Maybe the Nets to some degree, but it just seems like the hits just keep on coming for the Kings, who have a shot at making a playoff run in this historic postseason, regular season finale, at least, that they will be participating in.
Yeah, I mean the Nets are certainly the team that stands out. Miami also, the Heat have been decimated by the various tests. And I mean, when you think about it, 22 teams, right? And I believe it was 7 NBA franchises that had to close their practice facilities as a result of positive tests and multiple positive tests. And I think in full disclosure, because if you're a fan out there and you're seeing, oh, this guy's tested positive, or this team saying that a player has, I think in full disclosure and transparency in the way we do things, and I think Lena would attest to this, is we don't make people's positive tests known. That's just kind of been our ethic, I guess. I mean, because it is a private matter, and but that will change. I mean, once games begin, once you're within a 24-hour period of an NBA game happening, and it's preventing somebody from actually being with their team and being available to play on that from that roster, that's all out the window at that point. So yeah, we've known of what was initially 2 players. I think the Alex Len one was the only one that really caught me by surprise when he came forward and revealed. And then, yeah, I mean, we knew of Harrison about 2 days before he made it known. We had known before that it was a player, but we had just spoke to Harrison that Friday or Saturday, and he was inside the building before that Sunday, before leaving for Orlando that Wednesday, before they closed down the facility. So yeah, the Kings are certainly, I don't want to call them a mess, but they're certainly been impacted by this. And you mentioned the injury to De'Aaron Fox. That again, it's another nagging injury. But then Rashawn Holmes is out there, and he crossed what we like to call the gun line, if you're a fan of the movie Life. And yeah, he accepted a food delivery. There are food deliveries available to come to Orlando. They are an approved list. And Lena and I can't afford those. Well, maybe Lena can. I certainly can't. Del Frisco's and Morton's and things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, they're on the approved list, and if he was just after a Big Mac attack or something, and that's not on the list, and so he had to deal with a Postmates driver. And I think really the one you blame, if you really want to blame someone, now obviously Rashawn Holmes took accountability for it, but it's really Kelly Oubre who let everybody know, hey, you can do this.
I will say, as a Phoenix Suns fan, let it be known, if you didn't know, I'm from Phoenix, but I cover the Kings. Blame it on Tsunami Papi. Just why not? He'll be the scapegoat in this situation.
I will never call him that, by the way. That is never happening.
Well, that makes one of us. So, and of course, we know Rashawn's mom is very active on social media, Dr. Holmes, and she made it known you only cross the line for your mama's cooking. And she was not in Orlando. She made it known that she was not somebody who's going to pull up to the bubble and think that they can get some kind of access to one of these players, including her son, one Rashawn Holmes. But we heard from Luke Walton, and he feels bad. Of course he does. He was dealing with an injury, and now he was available and ready to play, and he's certainly staying active. As we've learned, they've moved exercise equipment into his room. He has the ability to communicate still with members of the Kings staff. He just can't participate, obviously, as he remains in isolation. And
he's going wild in his room right now, by the way. If you follow him on social media, he's having a concert in there. It's pretty fun to watch him try to cut loose a little bit and make a little bit light of the situation. He's got, 7 days remaining?
Right. I think, by the time I think most people might see this, it'll be about 6 days counting down to Wednesday's first scrimmage, as we mentioned. But, and that's one of the big things that I think we both kind of gleaned from conversations with Ken Bazemore, Luke Walton, and the players that we've been able to speak with, is that the importance of maintaining the mental health of these guys as they try to make sense of this odd environment, and it's becoming normal to them in a way, but again, it's not normal. And they're isolated. Some of them, as we've explained, Harrison Barnes, Alex Len, they are not we don't know when they will be back with the team. They're preparing as if they won't be available. But those guys are having to, isolate and go through this. And now Rashawn and De'Aaron now will likely have to be some kind of form of isolation, so to speak. But we've learned that Buddy Hield and Jabari Parker are being worked into more of the activities. They're not in full contact and participation, but we heard from Buddy, who is making light of the situation as well, talking about, potentially digging a tunnel under the Walt Disney World Resort to escape the property lines or somehow cross the line. That it's always good to hear from Buddy Hield.
I was entertained.
Some kind of capacity, yeah.
I was thoroughly entertained, and actually, I know people, may have overreacted to it. Like, he's making references to El Chapo and escaping the bubble and breaking rules, and shame on Buddy. But no, he's making light of it for sure. And just to clean up too, I mean, for people who don't know, the guys that rejoin, they have to go through the quarantine. But the protocol is you have to pass 2 tests first. So obviously, guys like Alex and Harrison Barnes haven't done that. Luke Walton said that, man, it's possible we have to continue as if they're not here and they may not ever be here. Certainly, Buddy went through 70% of practice today, Wednesday, as we're talking. And De'Aaron, he won't have to quarantine. He'll just, he'll obviously have his ankle thing. He'll be able to be around his team. It'll be fine. But Rashawn will not be because of crossing the line. And it's interesting, too, because Luke Walton said just yesterday on Tuesday after the practice in talking about Rashawn's situation that, like, how easy it is to not realize where those boundaries are. And look, they're over a week into their stay at Walt Disney World. And he mentioned how he almost himself went over a boundary and crossed a line that he wasn't supposed to be in. So that's kind of shocking to hear about, but you realize that there's several team hotels, there's several arenas, there's several banquet rooms that are being turned into practice courts. And it's got to be unbelievably tough. And I think the NBA, everyone we've talked to has said to just what an amazing job that both Walt Disney World and the NBA has done in keeping everyone's safety at bay. And, talking to people over the past several weeks, and you're seeing players test positive. And obviously we've chronicled that here tonight about what the Kings, and the struggles that they've had. But everyone's like, man, is this thing going to fall apart? And we're still, 15 days away from the first NBA game in Orlando, a week away from scrimmages. And I think the whole thing could come crashing down. But the one thing that the NBA wanted to see was get people into the bubble, show that the testing protocols are working, and then hopefully you can contain and keep the virus out. So far, so good, I guess, because you don't really have, that we know of, we don't have one of those positive tests within the bubble, and how they will respond to it. It's going to happen. I mean, I think we can easily predict it's going to happen. Things are getting a lot crazier in certain parts, especially here in California where we are. But they're anticipating it's going to happen. It's not like they're saying it's not going to happen, but how they can contain it once it does happen. And it's crazy to think too. We're only a little over a week in, almost 2 weeks into a stay at Walt Disney World. It's crazy.
Yeah, and again, this time next week, the MLB will be in full tilt. I mean, they're going to have a couple preseason or summer camp games as they call them, but they will be starting the regular season as well. But yeah, I gotta say, I don't feel very confident personally. I know that NBA is taking drastic measures, as they should, to protect everyone involved. The testing, the rings or wristbands or whatever they have to wear to keep track of how their temperature is fluctuating and whatever else it's tracking.
Michael Malone called it his Mickey Mouse watch, because it's not only what it gets him into his room, but there's actually Mickey Mouse ears on the band, and it lights up and plays like a little jingle.
Oh, of course it does.
Of course it does.
It's the mouse. But the league is taking every precaution I believe that it can. It's just a matter of whether that's enough to stop this very insidious disease that we're still learning a lot about, from creeping into this space. Especially, we talk about Buddy joking about it, but we're a week in. We got months ahead for some of these guys to behave and follow the protocols and not be involved in a space or a situation where they are somehow exposed to this, and somehow it creeps its way into the Walt Disney World Resort or whatever boundaries they're in on these multiple properties and spaces and ballrooms and water parks. And, I've seen video of guys go, it's great that they're enjoying themselves. Of course, they should be afforded that. But there's still the risk level there. And the fact that they, have to take the measures of throwing away a deck of cards after they use it once, after all touching it, you just got to wonder how long this thing will last. I mean, I was watching the basketball tournament, the TBT tournament, and I was just kind of
Travis Diener with the winner.
Hey, I wish I could look at a screen like that and just go boop, and have that pop up in my checking account. But I don't have the skills to make that happen. But it seemed like everything went well with that. I don't know of many reports of anything going south, but I feel like that's a good benchmark, at least, especially for ESPN when it comes to putting on the production and everything that came along with that.
And just not right across the campus of this Walt Disney World, you've got the MLS going on, and you've seen MLS players and teams with players bring the virus to Orlando. And you've seen teams bow out of their competition in Major League Soccer as a result, who just decide it's not worth the risk, and it greatly impacts the tournament they have going on. So, I guess the TBT did it right. We didn't hear from. It's also under such a smaller magnifying glass, and the numbers of people are a little bit different. But certainly, it's something you can point to. I know. Look, the UFC was like the first organization in sports that everyone was monitoring to see how they do it, and the reality of it is, and then we just saw it with the TBT, but the NBA doesn't have one event a week or even two events a week on the small end. They're going to have multiple games per day in the same venues, in the same training facilities, in the same practice facilities, and it's how they can manage and keep that stuff out. And to the point of that, every player we've talked to has talked about the confidence they have within the system. And to be frank, I just don't think that, in talking to a lot of these guys and things I've seen and read, that many people are fearful. Even with having friends and coworkers that have tested positive, they don't see the fear in it. Maybe it's because they're all healthy people. Maybe it's because they put their faith in a higher power and they just control what they can control. Whatever it is, you can see that these guys are, and again, like Lina mentioned, we're only about a little over a week into this. So what's it look like 2 weeks from now? What's it look like 2 weeks into August? If we even get that far. And I think once games start happening, it's going to be good, because right now this is just a small road trip that guys are used to, where they've had more freedoms. Now, obviously, they don't have the freedoms to see friends, family, what I like to call strange on the road. You don't have a lot of that right now. You have the bubble environment, and you're only around your friends and teammates and some other teams, obviously, that might be in the same hotel as you. So you can play ping pong, you can visit, you can chat, you can go play golf, you can go fish, but you're really limited. And I think a lot of those activities will tend to get a little long, and they'll tend to get a little bored after a little while.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, these guys could do anything they wanted with whatever time they had available to them especially during the summer. I mean, this is when most of these guys are enjoying the time with their family. And as we heard from Ken Bazemore, he got to enjoy that as some kind of silver lining from the stay-at-home order and everything that came along with it. But now he's away from his pregnant wife and young son, and that's going to be challenging for everyone involved, and the family aspect of it all. This is something unlike any of us have experienced, but to the level of where it's separating you from your loved ones for an unknown amount of time for some of these players. I mean, that's a huge ask, and again, to potentially risk exposure to this virus. I mean, yes, these are mostly healthy people, but we had concern as a general population of NBA fans for those like Alvin Gentry and Mike D'Antoni and the coaching staff, and people who have the age or pre-existing conditions that make them more vulnerable to complications with this. And especially in Florida, it's a struggle to manage right now. So that's the timing of it all, and of course you can't predict any kind of space where this is going to be safe, because we're back to square one almost in California, where we were 4 months ago. So we're dealing with those kinds of restrictions, but again, the NBA is taking every precaution to make this a safe space for everyone involved. And again, to reiterate what Sean said, there's a high level of confidence among coaches, players, and no one, again, is fearful. Even hearing from Buddy Hield, he tested positive, and he never.
Dogs.
They know what's up.
Uh-oh. When you see the spray bottle, that means no.
That means no.
Yeah, and it is funny, because when he's I don't mean funny, but funny in the sense that he was talking about playing down the fact that he had it, because I asked him, like, I'm just assuming how so many of the others that have, and they're saying how asymptomatic they were. They didn't really show any signs of sickness. And he says, no, he dealt with a few things early on, and his fear was spreading it to his family. But that quickly subsided, knowing that he was healthy, and things went up. I think that it's in his in the rear view now at this point, and he's just ready to move on from it. You could tell that having to, it's not just the media. I mean, we got the first chance to talk to him yesterday, but can you imagine him? Him and Jabari Parker are the first members of the team to rejoin the team after having testing positive, and you're just constantly asked, what was it like? What did you do? Was it from that basketball game in Oklahoma? What did what were you thinking? What happened? And he's constantly having to talk about it, and it's going to continue for the greater part of probably the next 2 weeks. And, he's now a real world situation for a lot of those guys. And, but there's a basketball component. And I think these guys are all confident they'll be able to play basketball. I'm curious to see if there's enough time to be able to pick up where they left off. Now, certainly you can't just expect this team who was playing well before the season was suspended to just pick up where they left off. But Luke Walton seemed very confident that there's enough time to get things going again, to pick up on things that were around. It's not like earlier in the preseason when it was truncated and you were worried about going to India. These things are different now. People know the terminology. People know the different methods and at least strategies that they try to implement in the offense and defense philosophies and all that. The team obviously added people at the trade deadline. So with July 31st right around the corner and finally getting some scrimmages under their belt, hopefully they've got enough guys to actually participate in some of these things.
Right. And one of those, as you mentioned, sorry, I'm confused under here.
Dogs.
Dogs. They're something. To play down the testing positive for Buddy to test positive. I feel like there hasn't been a level of anxiety among him or anyone among the team in regards to this, but I think there is a bit of a level of anxiety about who will be actually available. We've heard about different players playing different positions as we've heard of different people coming in and out. And again, this is only a week out of scrimmages. So once we get into contact with other players from other teams in other spaces, who knows what could transpire. But
yeah, and those anxieties, that's why Corey Brewer has been brought back to this team. The familiarity not only with the teammates that he had last year as a member of the Kings, but obviously playing under Luke Walton certainly helps. And they're going to have their full complement of G Leaguers. I should say they're two-way players. They're rookies in Justin James and Kyle Guy, and even Daquan Jeffries, who, Luke said Daquan Jeffries has really kind of stood out in some of these practice sessions. And if you don't know if you have Harrison Barnes, if you don't know that you have Rashawn Holmes and things of that nature, or if a big goes down or a stretch four goes down, what does that look like? It's all about having the next man up mentality. And we're seeing that happen in real time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the members of the team and Luke Walton, of course, kind of fielded questions about, hey, you experienced this early in the season with Marvin going down, De'Aaron going down, Bogey being hurt, Rashawn being out. They've had to adjust on the fly throughout the entire regular season leading up to, I would say, mid-February maybe, when they really kind of hit their stride and started showing signs of promise that, hey, if they can keep this up, they might be able to contest for that 8th seed for the first time in 13 seasons. But it's the sense of momentum or the idea of momentum, I don't think it exists, especially in this space where you've had so much time off. It has allowed for guys like Marvin and even Harry Giles to get healthier and to, even gain weight, gain muscle, kind of work on their craft. And that certainly makes them more valuable, especially right now, as we look to the lack of bodies that could be potentially available come next week, 3 weeks down the road when they are, in game 7 of 8, that's guaranteed to them as they really try to make this playoff push happen. I mean, they are, tied with 2 other teams and they are contesting. And, if things can somehow go right for them, especially when it comes to people knowing where the boundaries are of the bubble or knowing who they might have been in contact with and being aware of their surroundings. As we heard Buddy say, he didn't feel like he got the virus from playing basketball because no one else around him tested positive. But it's as simple as being in contact or in a space with someone who was with someone else who is with someone. It's as simple as that. And taking those proper precautions and trusting everyone on your team and from the staff to the equipment managers to anyone else that's involved in this whole event trying to be made possible and executed in the way that Adam Silver imagined and designed it to be executed. That's a lot. And they were even asked, as Sam Amick from The Athletic asked, do you think guys might even check out when it comes to down to a couple of weeks of this? And Luke Walton said, guys are bought in at this level, especially I feel like in conversations I've had with sports junkies, LeBron James, if he has anything to say about this whole thing is going to happen, because let's be real. I mean, I feel like his support of this and his almost silence in a lot of different levels with some of his colleagues coming forward or testing positive or deciding to sit out the season for various reasons. I feel like that might be something that people are considering in terms of how this whole thing is executed or why the importance of it, exists. But, I feel like this is something that a lot of people are confident that can happen, but it can all crumble in an instant and very quickly.
And you mentioned LeBron. Yeah, his buy-in, I think, is a big part of it. However, what does it look like if you're in the second or third round of the playoffs, NBA Finals perhaps, and he tests positive? And as Adam Silver says, everyone that does, then the protocol has to abide by a certain thing. You have to go into quarantine. You have to do through a whole protocol. Do they suspend the playoffs just so someone can get their guy back? Is that an unfair advantage? I think it is. I mean, if you're playing, let's say, the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA Finals, and right before game one, LeBron has tested positive, you don't suspend the NBA playoffs or finals. I'd love to see that, but if you're the Bucks, and even as much as they'd love to, not cheapen their title run, they'd rather go through LeBron than not. I think they'd be saying, no, we're not going to suspend just so the guy can get better. I mean, that's just it just doesn't seem feasible for the Kings. However, I think it will be interesting because they said before getting to Orlando that whoever handles the protocol, the rules in place, the virus itself, the best will be ultimately the teams that will be among the most successful. Well, so far, Sacramento's not among them, but you could argue that should go into play at least around the start of the season. So meaning July 30th, July 31st when they tip off. Maybe you still are in that time where right now you're still allowing things to happen because there's that evolution to the bubble when it's ultimately working and keeping the virus out. That could be the thought process. I don't know. So far, they haven't done a fantastic job because obviously they can't keep enough guys on the court. They don't have their full roster of players. They're obviously not the only team that's dealing with that. But as you mentioned, with the playoffs in mind and how well they were playing, even with how well they were playing, the opponents that they have been handed, I mean, that's an uphill battle no matter what. I think the percentages is like 16% chance of actually being able to make the playoffs. But more importantly, a 3-9 record against opposition that they're going to face in those first 8 games. And I think, to me, that as for as well as they were playing, that's a totality of the season, dealing with the injuries that they've had. No Marvin Bagley, De'Aaron Fox, which even though he missed those 17 games with the sprained left ankle, we know that he was dealing with that injury much longer than just those 17 games. He was playing with it hurt. So he did talk about just days ago how better it was feeling, how it's not an issue anymore. And then here's the setback. So yeah, he's evaluated 7 to 10 days from now. But what does that mean? I mean, is it still going to have the pain there? Is he now having to go into this restart of the season with a sore ankle? All those things come into play. And when you heap the real world problems on top of that, that's just a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we even heard from Marvin Bagley, who said that his foot sprain that kept him out for a majority of the season, it seemed like, when the Kings were playing well, actually. But, he doesn't feel any pain in his foot. He feels ready to go. He put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, it looks like. And Kent Bazemore even said this is his first opportunity to really play with him. And Kent has been a tremendous asset to this team in the trade deadline, and we've seen just the way he activates on defense and the impact that he's made. And Luke Walton spoke to his professionalism, even at that level, especially here in this environment. You look to guys like a Harrison Barnes, who is not available at this time, but you have Kent Bazemore available to have that sense of leadership and kind of setting an example to remind all of his teammates, like, hey, we have to take this seriously to this level. And he spoke to us earlier before departing for Orlando, and he had been taking this seriously, again, in his personal situation, his life with his wife and his family. And that's not to say that no one else on the Kings was not taking it to that level, but that was an important part, I think, of his conversation with reporters at that time, was stressing how this was something that he's been cognizant of. And especially now in the position that he and his teammates are in, you gotta be hyper cognizant of your surroundings, and we've heard that even injury prevention is a concern among staff and players, just because they've been out of this kind of competitive environment in this space. Some of them haven't even had a basketball hoop available to them, so this is their first time really seeing some kind of physical action that resembles a game, but you can't, as we've learned, resemble game fit to conditioned, as many of them have come in, of course, with the time to recover and have that space to kind of train on their own. But you got to wonder, with De'Aaron Fox going down now, this has been an injury-prone team, as we've seen throughout the season. So in this truncated regular season where they have so much to play for, I feel like that's something that, I don't know if it raises concern among fans or staff or necessarily, but that's certainly something to keep an eye on when we tip off with some kind of action next week.
Yeah, and the hunger is there, the thirst is there. This team really is chomping at the bit and confident that they can make some noise in this, and they feel that it really kind of plays to their advantage in terms of some of the things that they can do as a team: play fast, have that pick up that level of success that they once had just going before the season was suspended. They're as confident in flying as high as anybody, even with dealing with some of these setbacks. But you have teams involved that are trying to go for this 8th playoff spot that I'm not convinced will put up that much forth of it. I mean, obviously, your Phoenix Suns, as I say, I mean, they could win. Phoenix almost shouldn't even be in this circumstance. It's almost unfair to them because they literally have zero shot at actually getting to the playoffs. The Spurs almost, I don't even know if I can. They're not going to have LaMarcus Aldridge. It almost feels as if they're not going to be a player in this at all. So the confidence that I have that the team can make the playoffs is low, but I feel like they could come out and they could actually play really, really well. I just think that, the teams like Memphis, as long as they pick up and are able to keep other teams at arm's length, that's actually what I'm expecting. But I feel like the 8th isn't even really up for grabs. It's really, can the Kings force that play-in game between 8 and 9, be within 3 games of 8 and 9? You're already at 3.5. So if you can play well, you have a real shot at getting that play-in game, and then anything can happen. And like it or not, whether that happens or not, these are actual playoff games for this team. And for a team that hasn't been there in 12 years, these players in particular, they need to experience what the playoffs is like. And you could argue that last year, those last 20 games or so were playoff games. I would probably tend to agree with some of that. Obviously, it didn't go well. But to that point, I feel like this, especially with an 8-game stretch, will be a true test of really what the playoffs would be like. The only disadvantage is you are going to be playing different opposition, and it's not necessarily seeing the same opponent in a series. And I think that the strategies change a ton at that point, and that's really what this team really needs to feel right now.
So I'll ask you point blank, who gets the 8th seed?
God, it's such an unfair question, but I'll play along. I'm going to say.
Is it unfair?
I
feel like
it is, because
we have a temperature of the possibilities.
Well, okay, say this, and I'll use Denver for an example. I think they're 3rd. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have standings in front of me. There's no home court advantage, So a team like the Kings, for example, who have played better on the road almost by far. I mean, they have so many better games on the road where their back is against the wall than they do at home. And it's really kind of been like that for 2 years now. I don't know what that means, but certain teams play better at home than they do on the road. Most teams play better at home than they do on the road. How does that come into play? Is that because that they run at a breakneck speed usually? We haven't seen that breakneck speed a lot this year. So you don't know how teams will play to the environment in which they're in. So I do think there is a little bit of truth in however the teams handle the bubble the best will ultimately have the most success. I mean, there's obviously a talent and a coaching standpoint as well. So if a gun is to my head and I have to make a decision, I'm going to say that Memphis holds on to the 8th and we don't see a play-in game. I think I say that more so not in the belief that I have that Memphis is good enough to hold on to the 8th spot, but more so that I just don't think in the situation that's currently at hand that anyone can really leapfrog them or take over. Luckily, there's a huge distance between 7 and 8, so it's really only coming down to that 8th spot. So, and I just want to see what the give a damn is for some of these teams. Like the level of give a damn for some of these teams, like I mentioned with the Spurs, I don't know is ultimately going to be that high. I don't know that Greg Popovich is all that thrilled with being in this situation and putting his guys through this. I'm sure he definitely wants to see how his team will respond, but I think you're looking more towards the offseason as it is anyway. So I don't know. I would venture to say that I don't have confidence that the Kings would make the playoffs, but I didn't at the beginning of the season anyway. So how this changes, I mean, but if I'm them, there's nothing wrong with feeling like you can shock the world, and I think that's the right mentality going into this. Do you? I mean, do you think they can?
I don't think they can leapfrog Memphis. I was going to say I think the Grizzlies hang on to that 8th seed, just given the circumstances and the tough climb and the unknown that's ahead for all of these teams, really. But as we've seen from the Kings, it has been a bumpy road already to Orlando, and they've been there for a week, and we have many weeks to go, at least 2, for them to even have a shot. So, yeah, I think as you mentioned, they've played well on the road, and they perform well to some degree under some kind of pressure. I mean, we saw last year they crumbled after the trade deadline, and they were one of those teams that was shocking the world for the consistency of the regular season. And now, of course, we're under a new coaching staff, and there are a lot of different variables. But
Lina, I mean, for people who think we might be too negative, they're 3-9. They're 3-9 against this opposition, right, which is terrible. So, no one should be expecting them to push forward to the playoffs.
Odds are not in their favor.
No.
Absolutely. I mean, it's wishful thinking, of course, at best. And of course, you wish that these guys could pick up where they left off, but that's just not the case. If we were in mid-March, late March, and you asked me this question, I would be fully confident that this could be a game 82 situation where we're all standing wherever we are. I think they might have played their second to last game as originally scheduled of the season at Golden One Center, but we would have been there and biting our nails to see what would happen, as many of the games ended up being in the fourth quarter and the third quarter, as we've seen from many a crumble in the second half with this team. But they were playing so well that it was not out of reach for them to get that 8th seed. But now, with all of the variables, all of the time, all of the, again, unknown that lies ahead, I just don't know. I don't feel as confident as we once were maybe 4 months ago. But I believe that these guys will compete. Absolutely. I believe that they're bought in. Luke Walton's bought in. I feel like they made this trip across the country to do this, to make this happen, to make some noise. They've been, as we've seen, what some people would call disrespected by national media outlets and ignored by some people, not even given a chance. And truth is, the math isn't there. The math is right there. They don't have much of a chance. But as long as they are there and physically able to compete, they will. And I feel like they've gone to these links and they're doing all of this, that they got to be 100% bought in. And it at the very least, that gives them a shot.
And Kings fans should be used to that anyway. I mean, it's not like, look, as much as high as we all are on De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, they don't have the gravitas that Zion Williamson has, and obviously he's must see TV for a lot of people. So the guy who's pegged as the next best superstar in the league is going to get more attention to him. So yeah, more people are expecting the Pelicans to make more noise, especially considering they're healthy now. Well, luckily for Sacramento, if you feel disrespected, well, guess what? You get them twice. You get them twice in this whole thing. So that's a great thing to have. But that's nothing new for Kings fans. They know what disrespect from the national media is. It's oftentimes deserved, and it's oftentimes warranted, as much as they don't like it, until you change the perception of being a doormat. Look, it's 12 years since you've made the playoffs. So if they can snap that this year, hopefully, that comes with some broader average knowledge of your team by the national media base. So maybe you'll start to get some of that attention and some of that recognition that clearly you just don't deserve right now as a team.
Yeah, I feel like as a Suns fan, I can commiserate and relate.
Yeah,
I get it. But, again, the Kings will play their first of 3 scrimmages. We will see who is available. We will see who is healthy on both the teams, the Heat and the Kings, who will face off on July 22nd. And then we get the first competitive game on July 31st. And, man, it just seems like 2 years ago.
The competition, by the way, in those scrimmages should be pretty good. I mean, you mentioned the Heat. You got the Raptors and the Clippers, too. I mean, that's some of the elite teams right now in the league.
Well, is it the Raptors or the Bucks?
Oh, you're right. I think it's the Bucks. Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Still, tough competitors all around. And then, of course, you got to face the Lakers in your truncated regular season, which is going to be a tall order. As we've seen, Rajon Rondo is not going to be available. But, that's, again, injuries are part of the game. So I'm sure we're only seeing the first couple come up since people have gotten to Orlando.
Yeah, you're going to start to see probably more, especially, it was always the soft tissue injuries that guys were worried about, calves and hamstrings and stuff like that. But no, he fractures his thumb in Rondo, and, that just means Alex Caruso gets to step in the role and be the point guard that everyone calls him.
Oh, yes. Let him shine in all his glory. Shine,
I see what you did there. I see what you did.
Yeah. Yes. But, I'm not as hyped, I got to be honest, as I would be for the regular season or any kind of action, given everything that's going on in the world. And, of course, the league is going to use its platform, and we've heard from several players who are going to use the back of their jerseys to speak to social injustice and various causes that are important to them, as we heard even, again, from Ken Bazemore. He's kind of seeing the silver lining in this time to focus on things that are important to him back home, to focus on education equality or equity and recenter and kind of use this time to really kind of figure out a way to use this platform and this opportunity that they have ahead to make real change and not just be a distraction for a lot of people, as they want to call it. And that's great that we have this lighthearted activity that we all enjoyed, 4 months ago. But, I think that's another cool element of this whole thing right now that the league is trying to put together, and using this time and this space and this opportunity to make history in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, the players and organizations will certainly have their opportunity to voice whatever that is, to demonstrate however they see fit. They've got the time to do it. I mean, that's obviously, I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more done from the bubble yet, to be honest, and maybe they're using that to more coincide with games once those get started. But certainly the jersey thing will get a good thing. I got to be honest, I was surprised when I learned that every member of the Kings chose a message, because let's be honest, the messages that to choose from were not that plentiful. Much like the way LeBron James chose not to do it. He didn't really, he had to go from that list. There wasn't really others that could go through there. I thought that you might see a few that choose not to do it, especially considering I had to try to put my put myself in some of the players' shoes, especially like we mentioned, Kyle Guy, Justin James, Daquan Jeffries, where, their NBA futures are not guaranteed beyond this year. So do you really want to put a message beyond that jersey? I mean, I know I probably would, but I could certainly understand if they said, no, I want my name to be on the back of my NBA jersey. Who knows if I get this opportunity again? I understand that. But it was very good to see that everybody had chose one. Buddy Will, he hasn't landed on one, but I've been told that he is. We'll see which one he goes with. And I also hesitated because often so much of the league follows LeBron James' lead on things. Because he opted not to, I wanted to see what it was going to be like if anybody decided ultimately, because LeBron didn't, I'm now not going to do it either. That remains to be seen. At least by the deadline that was implemented in the first place, we know that there was only about 17 players that chose not to, and all 17 of the Kings players chose to participate in it. So yeah, and that's just the jerseys. I mean, my gosh, you and I were at the Sacramento Republic USL soccer game here in Sacramento, closed off to fans, and we saw the kneeling of the anthem. We saw messages on the back of the jerseys. We saw armbands. We saw fists in the air. We saw all kinds of different things. We saw things in the stands that obviously meant a lot in this community with the Boards for Change thing that you have been able to put on the forefront of things. And so it's interesting to see if the NBA will do something similar to that, whether that be not just the uniforms, but even promos. I mean, even not to go long-winded with it, but even the golf tournament up in Tahoe, no fans. They used opportunities there to record shows and have town halls and discussions about race and sports and the current state of the country. And I think all of that is all in the wheelhouse of what the NBA is looking to replicate.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've yet to really get a glimpse of what the league has in store or what we can really expect when competition really starts tipping off next week. But I would not be surprised to see more grand gestures, a more coordinated effort to, voice these kinds of or raise awareness to these kinds of issues for the league. And again, we've seen the Kings are well documented in support of these kinds of efforts and initiatives and using their platform to speak truth to power, so to speak, from the executive level to the player level. So, it's going to be a meaningful, I think, event for a lot of people. And yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, the Sac Republic, Boards for Change. If you want to look it up on Instagram, we have a lot of cool opportunities and ideas in the works with Sac Republic specifically. They'll be back in action at Papa Murphy's Park. It didn't feel that strange to me to be at a live sporting event for the first time in 4 months, and it was quiet, but I don't feel that it was any different, so to speak, of a vibe than I don't know. I felt comfortable.
I think that's because we're not really focused in on the crowd during games, obviously. But it did feel admittedly weird when that goal was scored, when it would be at either side, because that's ultimately where you would have a fan reaction, and there was none. There was some music if it was from the home team, but the first goal was scored by the visiting team, and it just, well, you can hear them celebrating. So I'm hoping, to be honest, that's exactly what we witnessed with the NBA. I know they're going to be on their bleep button, but I'm hoping that we get to hear a lot of the communication that's going on within those games. And I think we will. I don't think you're going to be able to catch them all.
No, I'm looking forward to hearing all the missed bleeps and all the real action that takes place verbally on the court, because it's hard to hear over the roar of the crowd at Golden One Center, especially in the fourth quarter. Certainly miss hearing that. But of course, we will keep you updated on the latest with the Kings as they continue their restart to the NBA season. I mean, seems like only yesterday we were standing in Golden One Center as the whole league postponed everything. But we are certainly looking forward to seeing some kind of action. We have tons of content available online on our YouTube channel at Hella Sports and ABC 10. And of course, you can follow us at Sean Cunningham at L Washington TV on Instagram and Twitter. And we will be back with more Kings Talk the bubble away from the bubble. As you see, we're all working from home. Don't know when we'll see the inside of our newsroom, but we will certainly see you guys on the internet at the very least in the upcoming days. So stay safe out there, wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.